If you think technology can solve your problems, then you don't understand the problems and you don't understand technology. It was a quote I came across from Bruce Schneer, who's a cryptographer, after I'd been speaking to Roger Smith. Hi, Roger. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you, Kerryn.
Excellent. Roger's been in the ICT industry since 1986, when a computer was a room, a hard drive was moved around on a trolley, and it was programmed in a language that not many understood. Roger, when I looked at your LinkedIn profile, I saw after your name that it says you're the CISO. Can you tell me what those acronyms stand for?
Sure can. A VCISO is a CISO is a Chief Information Security Officer. What their role in as an organisation is to actually define where your data and your assets are, and then come up with strategies and tactics around how you protect it, how you make sure that the organisation can function, but in a secure environment. To pay for a CISO will cost you about $200,000 to $300,000. So as you can understand, that's well out of the reach of small organisations, not-for-profit organisations, these type of areas. So what we do is we become a virtual environment. We do the role of the CISO, but on a very smaller scale. We implement and understand the security requirements around an organisation, and then tighten up security around that organisation to a level where you are now functioning properly and also having a secure capability as well.
Okay, so I've seen that you've worked in multinational organisations and small service providers and government departments, and you're now currently working with not-for-profits, associations and charities. And that's where my ears pricked up, because everybody knows, if they've followed some of these podcasts, that I'm very interested in helping grassroots organisations, and we have spoken to a lot of not-for-profits. But I was also really interested because we are so much more online now, and I know myself that there's a lot of things I don't know about cybersecurity and being hacked and things like that. And so when I was reading your article on LinkedIn about helping retirees and elderly people and not-for-profits to be more protected, I thought, I've got to speak to you. So one of the things that you say is that people think about cybersecurity on a range from 1 to 10 and what they know about it, and often they treat their level of security as a 1, and you think it really should be a 20. So I thought we needed to definitely point out why this is such an important issue for people. Yep. So firstly, how did you get into your profession and your industry?
Both areas. Into the ICT area, I was sort of literally, these are computers, we need it to manage our stock, look after it, and they gave us courses and built up that environment as I went forward. I took that into the early 2000s, and in 2008 I was hacked, and I suddenly realized that there was a different variation that we need to look at, and that was, yes, most people understand how IT works and what the IT principles are and how it can make an organisation better, but they don't think about the security behind that. And the wake-up call that I got in 2008 proved that if I knew that knowledge and I had that knowledge, that if I could get hacked, anybody else can. So that's where it all came from. And since then, I've been proceeding down that line of finding out how they work, what they are targeting, what complications they can create, and also on top of that, coming to building up a way for every organisation to protect themselves properly. And that's where we are now in 2021. We are now have the services and the capabilities to actually look at an organisation and say, these are the things that you need to put in place. We understand, especially in a not-for-profit organisation space, that every not-for-profit is totally different from everybody else. So you can't come in heavy-handedly and go, this is what you have to do. You have to look at a tailor-made solution to that organisation. And it could be understanding their risks and also understanding what their risk appetite is. If you've got a an organisation that doesn't mind the risk, then your envelope is going to be different from one who wants to actually restrict and secure an organisation properly.
So what are a couple of things that they may not, we often talk about, we don't know what we don't know. So what are a couple of areas that they might not have actually thought about that you often point out to people?
One of the things that we find is people don't think the capability or don't understand the capabilities of what the bad guys can do. Every organisation has a device that is connected to the internet. And I like to class the internet as the Wild Wild West. If you think about what was happening in the early 18th century in America, you had people grouped in cities, which was a totally different environment from the people who were moving into California and moving into the West. So when it comes to cybersecurity, that's exactly what we've got at the moment. We've got organizations that are like the cities. They are large, they have the capabilities, they have the investment capabilities to secure their information. Not most of them do a good job, but there are some that fall in between the cracks. But the people who are out there finding out what the frontier are is what we have today, is the basic user, the home mum and pup user, the not-for-profit who wants to do some good in the world. But the trouble is the bad guys don't care. And that's one of the things that people really, really don't focus on, is it doesn't matter what your mission is, it doesn't matter what your capabilities are, the bad guys are going to come after you no matter what. So you have to start thinking about, how do I stop them doing that? Now, when it comes to the bad guys, there are two very, very distinct areas. One is what we call the random area. And they are, think about the SMS you got from Australia Post, or Netflix needs you to change your credit card details. All of these are randomly generated attacks, and they're only targeting you because you are connected to the internet in some way. The second one is the targeted ones, and these are the ones who are really lethal. But to tell you the truth, they're not going to go after an organisation that has a turnover of $150,000. If you are an organisation that has $5 or $10 million, now you're in a different ballpark, and now you are a target of that area. So the random attacks is what we're trying to stop in most cases. If we can reduce the chance of someone clicking on a link or having a piece of malware appear on their system, then we are doing the job of what needs to be done. So the industry has come up with a number of basic requirements around how to protect an organisation. The basics are what we call the Essential 8. And that Essential 8 strategies literally raise an organisation from down here in the mud to about 10 feet off the level. So what you are now doing is you're deflecting an attack, and the bad guys are now going to go after someone else who hasn't done what you have done in the basics. The basics also include things like antivirus, a decent firewall, a decent passwords on everything. The Essential 8 is two-factor authentication, patching. All of these are basic things. It's when you start getting a bit more technical and you start reinforcing the basics is when you start looking at other requirements in security. So in other words, I'm looking at patching, but to make sure that my organization are updating all of their software at the right time, I need to have something that's going to tell me if someone hasn't done that. And that's the next flow on of what is required in security.
Right. You're certainly right about Australia Post texts and things like that. My phone is littered with them at the moment, and I know that they're not real because I've actually only was waiting for something to come for 7 weeks, and it finally is here, and I'm still getting messages about this delivery and this whatever. But of course, so many of us now are using online shopping and whatever, that easy trap to fall into for sure.
Yeah, and the bad guys work on the principle that they usually try to come from a point of trust. So coming from Netflix or coming from Microsoft, coming from the Australia Post. So it takes a bit of thought in how we approach those types of things. For instance, one of the biggest one with the elderly at the moment is the scam phone call, whereas they say, I'm from X, I need you to do whatever I need you to do. because people are thinking that this is coming from someone who knows what they're talking about, their level of trust has already been lowered significantly. And that's why they get caught in a large number of ways. To me, you have to be paranoid about whatever happens on your device. And if you are doing that, then you have a better way of protecting yourself going forward.
Well, I think when we first connected, I actually was a bit paranoid because I felt that one of my social media channels had been hacked, and then I just didn't believe anybody, anything. And fortunately, people who did know me well got in touch with me and said, I got this really weird, this didn't sound like you. And I know I've done the same thing to other people. So I think we have to just be on high alert the whole time, really. So
yeah, it's definitely a level of awareness that we have to kick everybody into. There's a number of solutions out there where you can raise awareness for organisations, for the elderly, for kids is another one where we really are failing in a number of ways. I teach at Australian Defence Force Academy, and the undergrads who are coming through who are doing the cybersecurity course in their first year, one of the questions that I ask them when they first come into each semester is, how much do you know about computers and the security around computers? And most of them answer, I know how to play games, I know how Word works, but they don't understand the underlying requirements around making a computer secure. And it is noticeable because that's the type of thing that should be taught in year 10, year 11, year 12 going forward, because everybody has now got the device. Everybody has got a mobile phone, even though they're not supposed to be taking them to school or they're not supposed to be using them. And that then introduces other areas we've got to think about that they be scammed. The information they put out there on the internet, on social media, can they be threatened or bullied? All of that now becomes something that we've really got to start focusing on, because we have a device one of these that we carry around in our pocket all the time.
Yeah, I think we had that conversation, and the phone is really, one of my areas of concern, because I think I've had conversation with you about, do you have virus protection? Do you do this? And you were talking about the effect of someone being able to scam your phone as you walk past. So what are a couple of things that you think people really need to do? If, like, I'm sure there's a really long list, but, and I know you're working with companies, but, just as individuals, what are some of the key things that we need to make sure, I guess from a business point of view, is make sure that your team understand and you have things in place, but families, parents, the individual, what do you think?
Well, it's quite funny. The Essential 8 was designed for business, but you can actually apply it to homes. It is what it entails is those 8 strategies that you need to look at within an environment. Now, out of those 8 strategies, 5 of them you can apply straight away to any device. One is patch the operating system and patch the applications. It doesn't matter how it's done. It doesn't matter. The operating system builders now are doing it regularly. So, for instance, Microsoft does it what they call Patch Tuesday, which is the second Tuesday of every month. Once you've done that, you are now protecting the requirements within a device. So malware and ransomware and viruses are based on targeting a vulnerability. And if I have updated my system, I've removed that vulnerability. So even if I do accidentally click on a link or open up something I shouldn't have done, the chances of that malware hitting my system because it's all patched up means it's got a less chance of actually being able to compromise the system. The third one is two-factor authentication. Now, we use cloud significantly. Everybody has a cloud account, whether it's a Google email, an Office 365 account, always, and even your social media companies, always put two-factor authentication. Now, two-factor authentication takes it to the next level. You've got a username, who you are, you have a password, what you know, and now you have something that you either control or have access to, and that is a mobile phone, an SMS, or an application that actually does the authentication for you. The thing about two-factor authentication is that it doesn't matter who is asking you, you never give that code to anybody else. It is your code, it is only managed by you and doesn't leave your person. Because some of the scams are now working on, I want to prove who you are, I'm going to send you a code. That code has come from a platform that has asked for two-factor authentication. they use that code, they have access to your system, and the first thing they do is change the password. So those are the things that you have to think about when it comes to that environment. Another thing is always do a backup of your data. You don't know what's going to happen to a device. You don't know whether you are going to drop your phone in a puddle or your laptop hard drive is going to fail. Never mind the cyber stuff. The physical breakdown of your device literally means that you've got all this data and nobody can get at it anymore. So if you've got a backup, you need to have literally a copy of the data. And although people say, oh, but everything's in the cloud and everything's on Office 365 or OneDrive or Google Apps, if one of them decide to lock you out, you lose all access to all of that information. And again, people forget that cloud environments are just someone else's computer. Yeah, they're big names, Microsoft, Google, Apple, but they are still other people's computers, and you've got to treat that information. Now, we have what is called the 3-2-1 rule. So 3 copies of all information in 2 different locations, and one of them is out of band, which is not connected to any device at the time. Now, we used to work on the principle that those 3 copies were literally a hard drive that you took off and plugged into your computer, but you can't do that anymore because if you forget, it could go 2 or 3 weeks between times where, yes, you've done an update, you've got malware on your computer, it's now encrypted all your data in your backup. So you have to start taking notice of where your data is and actually work out how you can do it. The last one is that you need to think about is administrators. If you're using a home computer, the administrator account, it doesn't matter whether it's an Apple or a Microsoft device. The first account that you create on that device is going to be the administrator. They are God on that computer. So you need to make sure that God can't be handled badly. So once you've got your God account, you then create all your user accounts underneath that. That way, if something is required to be installed or updated or changed, then you're going to get a prompt that you need to put an administrator account into the system to do that. So you're getting that warning. But in addition to that, if something does happen and you're the administrator, the bad guys have full access to that computer straight from the top, and you don't want that to happen. So those 5 environments that you can literally plug into every computer on the planet, literally by having those 5 things in place. The other one is one of the things that we really try to get people to understand is increasing awareness around what the bad guys can do and what they need to what you need to focus on to actually get things done. And if you do the awareness training, most businesses now offer it as part of their HR and onboarding process. The trouble is most of them are looking at it, I would do this once a year. It doesn't work like that because after 2 months, changes forgotten. Yes. And also there's changes in how the scams will work, how the attacks are targeting them. All of these things need to be locked into the brain and in such a way that you're going to look at it and go, oh, that's a scam. And that is what you're looking for. In business or in just personal, you need to be able to go, ha, I saw that. And that's the level of awareness that we need to have. In a business, it's really good to make it a competition. Literally, I saw this. Did you see this? What did you do with it? All of that. It gets the conversation started on how we secure the data and the organization properly.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. And I think you've written a couple of books on this topic. So, yeah, so tell us about those.
After my escapade in 2008, I wrote a book on the basics of business security. Literally, it was just me dumping all my brain onto a book in some way. In 2014, I wrote another one, which got me the job at ADFA. That was cybercrime, a clear and present danger, because in 2014, I was starting to see the trends that the bad guys were doing. We were seeing some of the capabilities changed, and we were also seeing the introduction of advanced persistent threats. That then prompted me to write my second book, and I'm in the process of writing my third at the moment, but it's sort of slowed down a bit because of COVID and everything else. But that one is, the one I'm writing at the moment is all about changing our attitudes from being a target to actually being a moving target. So being harder to hit, being harder to compromise, to be harder to hack. And that's literally how we have to look at protecting in the 21st century going forward, because if we don't start focusing on this, we're going to have a major problem. We have got a major problem at the moment, but it's going to get a damn sight worse. So
yes, yeah, it's certainly very much about awareness, hence why I wanted to have the conversation, because I think we start sort of chipping away at it and making people more aware, then we can do our bit for creating a bit of a change or having an impact. So you have a few free products that people can access as well. How do they go about that?
We have a page on our website, which goes to a number of other places. One of the things that we found for small business and not-for-profit organisations is because they have no baseline to work with about actually understanding where they could be compromised or what the targeting could be happening or how do I secure an organisation, we came up with 3 free processes. One is what we call the scorecard. A scorecard is fair enough, it's a lengthy, but it has to be a number of questions that are actually associated with what you're doing with security and what you need to do. Now, what that does is it gives us a score out of 100%, and it also breaks it down into certain areas of how we secure an organisation. And that then gives us an indication of this is where you are and this is where you need to be. And it gives you a roadmap of where you need to go to actually get to that level. The second one is taking that information. We actually run a webinar once a week on Fridays. If we have people who are going to turn up, we run the webinar. If then nobody turns up, don't worry about it. But we always have one of our guys who is free, who's ready to run it if people log into it. We've also taken a copy of that, which we're now in the process of making it a perennial. So if you can't make it to Friday, you can literally jump on there and do that. And the last one is what we found was people don't know how to articulate what they consider is security and what their problems could be. So what we've come up with is we give you 30 minutes of time. You bring us your problems or your ideas or your direction that you want to go in, and we will then discuss them and find out, whether it's doable, what you need to secure it, why you need to do that capability. Now, the reason why we did that, and one of the things we've tied with that is a non-disclosure agreement. So if you want to have a 30-minute, it's no use us saying, well, I ask you a question and you say, well, we don't want to give you that because that's intellectual property. We can't really come up with a solution to protect that intellectual property. So with an NDA in place, it means you can talk freely about it. We're not going to discuss it outside the conversation. And by doing that, we then come up with a couple of solutions to your problems. And they are based on your problems. They're not based on what we perceived as your problems. They are based on the problems that we actually discussed in that discussion. So those 3 products are designed in such a way that to get people through that basic process of what do we need to do to be secure. And after that, we can then discuss it, or you can go and talk to someone else. Now, one of the things that I get into trouble with my business partner is I have the opinion that if you do all 3 of those and you're in the States, for instance, go and talk to someone in the States. But you need to start taking control of the solution or the cyber component of the business. Because if you don't, even if you think that, well, we don't want to use Roger, let's go and talk to someone else, I'm getting a result out of that as well. So I'm not, and as I said, he gets really upset about it because I am taking our bread and butter away. But to me, it's more important that people are actually starting to talk about the solution to the problem, not we're going to charge you X to get to that solution. So
I really like that. It reminds me of that quote, you have to have your heart in your business and business in your heart. So it's all about creating that impact and that safety.
Yes.
So that's very impressive that you just want to make an impact. If you came to one of the events that I run, it could be the one where we actually play cards, and you might get the card that says, what are the 3 top things you've learnt from being in business?
The 3 things I've learned in business, cash flow is king.
Yeah. Even though you give the job away.
Mainly because one of the things that we do know is in our environment, we can literally go have a drought of a month where we don't get any new clients coming through at all. And although we've got managed service capabilities, they cover the base requirements of the business. So in other words, they cover the rent and the electricity and the wages and everything else. But if we want to have anything else, we've got to have that constant coming through. The other one is don't stop marketing ever, because marketing and sales are so tied together. And if you start, just because you're in that tight spot with your cash flow, if you stop marketing, it gets worse, and you never want to be in that situation. And the third one is really in my environment is don't take things for granted, especially when, for instance, if you go out and buy a piece of hardware or software, you are told by the salesman that it is going to be secure and do all the right things. Get someone to verify it, find out how it is perceived in the industry. All of that is part of the due diligence that you need to do in my industry. Because if you are accepting something because someone else has got it, you are a CEO that Joe Blow has now got his new fangled phone. I want one. I can guarantee he didn't do his due diligence. You need to do that for yourself and your organization. And those, to me, it's we've got to look at business a little differently after COVID came along as well. A lot of things that we used to do, we are no longer going to do in the same way, and we have to be flexible enough to be able to change directions.
Absolutely, absolutely. You may also get the card, what do you hope to do that you've never done before?
I don't know, to tell you the truth. I've never been thought about. I suppose I'm lucky. I did 21 years in the Navy, and I did some absolutely crazy and stupid things in that period of time. So a lot of the things that I have done already are some of the dreams that most people have: jumping out of planes, diving, all of that type of environment. I've been in a situation where I've had guns pointed at me, something that you really don't want to have, because it really does make your hair go grey. But those are some of the experiences I've already had. So when it comes to what haven't I done yet, don't know yet.
I know, it's interesting, isn't it? And it really gets you thinking. One of the conversations I had earlier when I started the podcast was with a not-for-profit, and she actually told me she wanted to live in a lighthouse because she wanted the 360-degree view of the world. So there you go. That's a different one.
That's nice.
Yeah, and I've never even spent the time to think about it. But yeah, it's interesting. So Roger, thank you very much. And to finish off, do you have a quote for us?
One is something I was thinking about recently is we don't really understand what the depth of the cyber crisis is, because we're right in the middle of it at the moment. We will be able to look back on it in 10 years' time and go, we now understand what the hell was going on. But at the moment, we have no 360 visibility of what is actually happening. And that, to me, is something that we really need to change. Not a quote, just an attitude that I've got.
Yeah, I think it's true, because we don't know what we don't know. And that's going to continue, because we'll think we know it and there'll be something else there. So we just have to keep alert. So, yeah. Thank you very much for your time today. I hope that people will reach out, and definitely they can follow you on LinkedIn, because I have really enjoyed reading your posts, and that's a good place to start to connect with you. And your website is?
Care MIT, so caremit.com.au. And if you /free, that takes you to the page that I was talking about.
Right. And whilst you're based in Canberra, you service? We
do everywhere in the world.
That's a beauty of internet, isn't it?
Oh, it is, yeah. We're actually, when COVID came along, we had to most of our clients were Canberra based, and it meant that one of my guys could go there and do whatever they needed to do. when COVID hit, we suddenly realized that we've got a really big audience out there who have a requirement for what we do. And we can literally get to any computer anywhere in the world now using some of the technology that we've got access to. So.
Yeah. So the quote that I'll finish off with is, "The trust of the innocent is the liar's most useful tool," which is a quote from Stephen King.
Yes, I agree.
Thank
totally
you.
agree.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Kerryn. Much appreciated.